Okay, so what we're going to do is go ahead and get this meeting started here. Like I said, I do apologize. So it will be at 3:33 that we begin, and we'll get going there. Everybody has the agenda in front of you. So if we can, let's take roll call. Is Lauren going to take roll call? Lynn? Lynn?
Yes, sir, I can take roll call.
Pardon?
Yes, I can take roll.
Would you please?
Yes. James Eklund,
Here.
Don Langley,
Here.
Clark Hamelman,
Here.
Jim Morris,
Here. Is it on?
Roger Hudson,
Here.
Frank Johns,
I'm here.
Evan Ela,
Here.
Harold Smethills,
Here.
Sean Tonner,
Here.
Tricia Bernhardt.
Here.
Additionally, we have Bill Wasserman, Kevin Rance, Kim Herberg, and Mickey Conaway online.
Okay,
Those are alternates. Okay.
we're good to go then?
Yes.
All righty. So first thing I'd like to do is get approval of the minutes for the last meeting on July 22nd. So if anybody has any changes, please bring those up at this point in time. Otherwise, I need a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? None. One abstention. Thank you, sir.
I was not present.
Okay, note that Sean Tonner was not present, so. All righty, so with that, it looks like those official minutes have been approved. Okay, now, the first item on our agenda we want to get to is item 3A. And this is actually the RFI that we issued, and where we have some wonderful consultants and vendors who have obviously replied with an interest in maybe pursuing this particular opportunity. I would like to just remind the board what the role of the presentations we're going to get. We have 30 minutes allotted for each one. And we will let staff then handle that, and I'll turn this over to staff here in a minute to make comments and additional directions or anything if they haven't. But one thing I do want to make sure that we understand what this is. We will not be selecting, quote, a vendor. There will not be a vote. There will not be a decision. This is merely for us, as we have been directed to do, to get additional information to ensure that the RFP that we have issued has that they feel they have any additional information that can be actually integrated into that RFP. So I would advise you to take notes. If you have a parking list, please start one. And then when we get together the next month, we will then begin to look at the RFP as structured and see if we're going to make any changes and then make an approval of that RFP to be issued at some point in time there. But right now, like I said, this is not picking someone, this is learning and getting to know the particular vendors who have responded and who have chosen to participate at this point in time. Any questions? Yes, Frank?
So they shouldn't be discussing their qualifications, just?
No, that's fine. They can
Okay,
talk.
just wanted
I
to
think
make
they're
sure.
going to tell us anyway. That's part of the presentation, so yeah.
But that was specifically excluded last month.
Well, okay.
There's going to be none of that, so we don't
I
want to
think
waste
we're
our
going
time.
to go through a whole bunch of that, but I think they're going to give us a presentation of their, and even if you look at the RFIs, they talk about what their expertises are in their background. So I think they're going to come up and share with whatever they have, in my opinion.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns?
And we are to ignore that.
Okay. With that, I want to turn it over to Katie at this point in time. Katie?
Thank you. And if unless there's any other discussion, we can go ahead and have the first presenter come on up, and that's going to be INTERA. Oh, excuse me, Forsgren.
How are you? Can you hear? Can you hear?
Not yet.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Will Koger with Forsgren Associates, and we are qualified. Just want to set your mind at ease there. So, I've been the project manager for a handful of these countywide water plans to this point, and here we go. So, by way of introduction, I've been the project manager and have put together a really good team. We've got just excellent expertise in the areas needed, and we've worked now on, as I said, a handful of these different plans. And with me today is Mr. Bill Franzak. Bill is with LRE Water. They've been responsible for our GIS mapping, data analysis, and groundwater modeling efforts. So really key parts of what we've been doing with these plans. Also with me is Ted Hyde. Ted is with Michael Baker International. They've been responsible for the public engagement and the land use planning efforts. So have those guys up here in just a minute. First, a little bit of background here. Douglas County is shown in red, and the 3 neighboring counties that are crosshatched are the ones we've completed water supply studies or water master plans for. From top to bottom, it's Arapahoe County, Elbert County, and El Paso County. El Paso County is the most populated county in the state, and Arapahoe County is number 3. So a quick overview of what we'll talk about today are key elements of a county water plan, and more specifically regarding the Douglas County scope of work. I've attended all of your meetings and have listened carefully to your discussions, and I know there's just a lot of considerations here to think about. Policy and engagement is a real cornerstone of what we've done with these plans, and ultimately it's all about water supplies. Are the water supplies sufficient for the future? And a big part of that is groundwater analysis. We know that we're in a part of the Front Range that's very dependent on groundwater, specifically Denver Basin groundwater. And so this is a key part. And we have a demo planned for you a little bit later. Okay, so key elements of a county water plan is to plan for current and future water needs, and then also to assess future water supplies with respect to demands. Some water supply projects are just in the conceptual stage at this point. Some are further along in planning. And the question is, are those future water supplies, are they going to be enough to provide for the needs of the future? And so an important part of what we do is to identify any potential shortages or gaps. We do a gap analysis. Are there certain parts of the county where water supply may be questionable in the future? And so we want to make sure we're looking at all that and bringing it all together. So part of the answer may be how maybe using water more effectively and more efficiently. That can be through water conservation or through water reuse. In many places now they're using aquifer storage and recovery. And when you've got additional flows during some additional renewable flows, maybe you can treat that water and plug it in the ground for later use. So there's a lot of strategies of using water more effectively and more efficiently. Also, engaging residents to better understand their needs and the needs and concerns with regard to water supply. We all know folks go and turn on their faucet and that's their water supply. But there's much more to that, as you all are aware. And it's, I think, helpful for the broader public to understand what are the water supply issues in the region. And so that's something we spend a lot of time on, is to engage residents. And finally, we complete the study on balancing demands and supplies and knit it all together. And then that is usually geared towards some type of policy or regulatory change for addressing long-term supplies and making sure that the supplies are adequate for the future planning period. So looking more specifically at the Douglas County scope of work, I know early on you were considering having the groundwater modeling separate from the water plan. And we very much recommend having it all as one package. There's things that can be done concurrently, and it's very efficient, and it's good to make sure that all the information agrees as you go forward. And so we would very much recommend a combined coordinated water plan with the modeling. So phase 1 is regarding water supply and demand. The first task is data collection. There are some large water providers that are in Douglas County, specifically Parker, Castle Rock, and Centennial Water and Sanitation District / Highlands Ranch. Those 3 members are They're members of the South Metro Water Supply Authority, and they've done a lot of work with regard to evaluating their demands and planning for their water supply futures. And so we know there will be a lot of good information for those water providers. Then there's another tier of 15 to 16 smaller mid-sized water providers, and some of them are also members of South Metro. But these are like the Larkspurs, the Leviers, Inverness, for example. There's quite a few actually of the smaller water providers, some of which I know you all are associated with. Some of you are on boards for those smaller providers. And then we know there are individual well owners that are throughout the countryside across the county, and those are usually large lots that folks have their own well and septic typically. And so all of these user groups are certainly interested in what's that long-term supply look like, do all the pieces fit together, and so that's part of the planning effort. Then task 2 is to perform water demand projections for the future, and then to do a groundwater analysis. How much groundwater is going to be available to meet those demands, and is it sustainable for the long term? And so that's a key part of that as well. Phase 2 then would be regulation and policy analysis and stakeholder engagement. Again, a cornerstone of this planning effort. And finally, the third phase is to develop the comprehensive water plan, knitting it all together and showing that it all makes sense. So with that, I'm going to ask Ted to talk more about the policy and engagement piece, and then Bill will talk about water supplies.
Thanks, Will.
Yep.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us. A real short story before I dive in here. I was between I-25 and 6th Avenue and getting off at exit 182. I saw license plates from 8 different states. So they're still coming to Douglas County and other points all throughout Colorado, especially along the I-25 corridor. So it's a good thing. We're talking about long-term supply. A bit on the policy and engagement that Will touched on in relation to Task 2 specifically. As we recently did for Arapahoe County and would be certainly applicable to Douglas County, is looking at, in concert with you and in coordination with you, opportunities for what could be new, or maybe as I like to say, retrofit or amended policy or regulations as it relates to water use, water storage, water conservation. And when we look at that 2050 demand, where are opportunities where we as a team, yourselves included, and the commissioners can look at things like the development review process? And are there opportunities to introduce water conservation measures into the development review processes? The zoning code is an obvious candidate and something we would want to look at very closely to say, okay, when we're talking about things like building systems and either recommending or mandating what types of fixtures can be employed in those building systems, are there opportunities for the development community to help address water demands for the long term and water conservation for the county? Landscaping is another big one. I don't know if I'm sure many of you are aware, Arapahoe County just completed a complete update to their landscaping code, and I know that Douglas County has looked at this, and you have certainly a countywide conservation group, but that whole notion of looking at water-wise xeriscape landscaping for the commercial, municipal, and residential sectors, and are there opportunities that are approachable to county residents and stakeholders to convert their landscaping methods for long-term water conservation? And then current zoning allowances. When we look at minimums and maximums on lot sizes, for example, are there ways through adjustments or amendments there that we could potentially help conserve, reduce demand in the long term? So these are all types of things that we would look at as a team for Douglas County. And then the engagement piece. Will touched on this. And let me emphasize, with engagement, we would want to calibrate it with the commission and with the commissioners so that it's the appropriate level of engagement and we're employing the right touch points along the way. But really, the key thing is that we are working not in a vacuum, but alongside key stakeholders such as yourselves. And that's why you're mentioned up there, the commission, possibly being a technical advisory group that we would work with closely as we're doing this regulatory and policy review. Focus groups that may exist in the county, and I'm sure some of you could recommend who those folks would be that are really knowledgeable about water issues. As we've done on other long-term water supply studies, we have a broad suite of digital and in-person engagement tools that we can use, from open houses to intercept surveys to online MetroQuest tools. So there's a variety of ways we can do it. And then very importantly is to keep the commission informed. Really from the word go, we want them to be aware of what's going on, what the needs and the issues are, and then to stay apprised so that when we come to recommendations, there are no surprises. And so what does that all translate to? Will mentioned this, but the education piece is important. I've done some drought analysis work for FEMA, and it's one of the things we've found, which is amazing, is the limited knowledge across Western states, Colorado included, about the severity of the aridity and, in many cases, drought. People not being aware of the long-term constraints. So we want education as a key part of it. And then being very clear, if we're to recommend changes to the building code, why? What's the purpose? How is that going to help? We want that to be very clear. And then building partnerships for the meaningful change after plans adopted. The building sector, nonprofits, political officials, staff, the planning director, for example, making sure that those alliances exist so that we can really advance the recommendations into reality. Bill's going to come up and talk a bit about the supply side.
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Franzak. Thank you for having us today. I'm here to just talk a little bit about the water supplies, which you all pretty much know is going on in the county here. We have, obviously, as from this map shows, Douglas County covers, half of it's covered by the Denver Basin, the other half is in the mountainous region. The renewable water supplies are, Cherry Creeks of the world, the South Platte, as well as all that fractured granite that's up there in the high country. That's all considered renewable. It does get filled by rain. It's not a non-renewable resource, and it is subject to possibly augmentation plans depending upon how that impact is to those rivers. But there's also the non-renewable resources, all the Denver Basin. That's kind of the eastern part of the county, and that's from the Dawson down to the Fox Hills. So that's where that's a key water supply for the county. You got the fractured bedrock that's up there in the mountains, and that's hit or miss when you get water there. But when you're in the Denver Basin, you kind of want to have to know about that and see what is the sustainability of those aquifers as we go forward. And so what we've done is we've taken a look in our other counties about really taking a hard look at the technical data that's available out there from the state or from the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission or from other entities to really take a look at what those geophysical logs are and what the geology is really in those Denver Basin aquifers. And so we do a geologic modeling, we do an interpretation software. And what we try to do is we take a look at that and from an individual aquifer standpoint, and do we come up with, like we're doing in Arapahoe County, we come up with production factors. It's not as the simple 200-year, 300-year rule, something that other counties have looked at. It's more of a, let's look at the aquifer specifically and what does that specific, yield come from? I'm not using the term from the Denver Basin, but what does that look like from an aquifer perspective? So we really get into a deep dive there by looking at some of that technical data. And then specifically about the groundwater analysis, we really want to look at the county's, the evaluation of the county and the use across the county. The county already has water zones, which you all are aware of. You got the mountainous zone, you got zone A and B, and then you got the central plain zone, about how wells should be issued and why they should be issued. For example, up in the mountains, it's, you have to have at least a gallon a minute or up to 10 gallons a minute well testing to make sure that the well is going to be sustainable for the individual property. And it varies across the county for the various regions. What we would do is look at the individual data, specifically focusing on the Denver Basin, on whether those need to be modified, whether they're good, whether they're not good, specifically focusing, like I said, on the Denver Basin. Because we've got those regions A zones, which are up on the outcrop. Is there better data to show that maybe there is more water available? That's something that we would look into. We would obviously use the SCO databases to find that. There's a wealth of information out there, and just, it's sometimes cumbersome to get through the state engineer's website. We're pretty good about getting that information into a usable format, which I'll show you here in a bit. And then obviously work with the water providers that are out there. We've had some experience with the Castle Rocks of the world and the Dominions and that, to really take a look at what they're doing for their water supply to kind of see how that can work in the future, whether a water provider can come in versus individual on-lot wells if there's additional water. Those are some of the questions we would try to answer as we go through this. As I indicated, we use this software. It's called Petra. It's the geologic interpretation software. I'll show you that real shortly. And then we'll summarize all this information from the major subdivisions who use individual on-lot wells, centralized systems, cities, towns, other types of issues, to give the county that information about what's out there, what's really kind of going on with these folks, just based upon their information about what the SEO has. Finally, we will develop, as part of this process, an individual interactive map of kind of the water resources across the county to be incorporated with what the county already has. They have quite a bit of GIS information out there on the website as it is. And what this would do is to be able to take that data, utilize that data, what the county wants to look at, and really get into kind of providing an educational tool, not only for the county commissioners, but also for the public to look at. And I'll give you just a quick rundown of the web application. It should click up right now. This is what we've put together. Rudimentary, we put it down a little bit. It hasn't officially been approved by the Arapahoe County Commissioners, but basically this is an interactive map that we put together. This over here is just kind of a general, tutorial how you use this thing. But again, this can be tailored to work within the county's GIS and all that. So what we've done is we've come over here and we got 4 major categories: general groundwater data and reference data. That's your streams, your designated basins, your Denver Basin, aquifer type things. I can get into that. But what I really wanted to kind of show, because we have limited time, is like some of the specific groundwater data here. As we go down, this is Arapahoe County. So we can go down to production wells. We can look at all, we can separate up, like Denver Water has a bunch of different water providers, and we can get their individual wells, what they're doing. But say for this is the Arapahoe County, we can get high capacity wells in Denver Basin, but what we really like to look at is all these low capacity or small capacity wells for individual households. So it'll populate across there. We can zoom in. What's really interesting about this, you can tell where the subdivisions are that use individual on-lot wells. Here they are. There's one right here. There's a bunch down here. These are all individual on-lot wells, no centralized system. So what we can gather from that data is we can really take a look at those wells. We can click in on it. Let me get one here. And that's Thunderbird Estates. It actually happens to be one that we're looking at. Pardon me. Just go over here real quickly. It should pull up here. If not, I'll zoom in a little further and get it. But what we try to do is we try to link this data to, that's the well permit on a specific lot. You can get into the GIS. This will pull you up to the state engineer's website, and then you can look through all your image documents. Whether your well testing logs, your well completion logs, what have you. The reason this is important is we've had a lot of folks from these subdivisions as individual on-lot wells. They said we've constructed these wells down to the upper Arapahoe, for example, or the Denverns, and they say, well, our well's going dry. Well, when you look at the data, that's really not. It's a well construction issue, which makes sense. You're on a individual lot. You don't want to pay $300,000 for a well, so you're going to do what you can. You'll drill it down. Once that water shoots up the well bore as a result of that pressure, you stop. Well, now you're just pumping off that pressure head. You're not even in the aquifer. And so now you think that the aquifer is going dry when it really isn't. So it's really key to pull that data together from the state engineer's office in these maps. One real quick other thing that we'll do real quickly here is I'll just go down and show you what we do with Petra. I'm going to shut this here. Pardon me. So if we go, first off, what we do is we do cross sections. I'll zoom out here. We choose a number of wells, and we go across the county with cross sections. On these cross sections, we put together key geophysical logs, whether it's from the state engineer's office, oil and gas, or what have you, and then we interpret it to see what the different aquifers are and where the sand packages are. You'll see in the state engineer's records, you'll see, like the Denver here. I'll just do the upper Arapahoe, that's easier. They'll say that's maybe 300 feet of saturated thickness, but the sand package, which they talk about, is the net sands, might be 30% of that, based upon data that they have. Well, we can go in there and look at it a little further. And if we zoom in, we can say, okay, well, here's the Upper Arapahoe and this specific well, here's the sand package. Water really comes out from a physical standpoint right around 12 ohms on these geophysical resistivity logs. Excuse me. So you can start seeing that there are some sand packages in here, but it's not continuous. It's not a big bathtub. And you can see in other aquifers that it's maybe not as productive. You can use that data to really kind of hone in on what's going on, like in these subdivisions here. You can zoom in. Okay, we got a cross-section going through here. Was the Denver really something that was good and they should have relied on? Well, in the 1970s when we put a well in, yeah, it looked good at that time, but maybe it doesn't look good here. Then we can go further, and I'll just go into this real quickly. I was talking about the Upper Arapahoe. Click on that. I won't do that. We don't have to look at that. That's not fun. But we'll go to the net pay map. And what is this? What is this? This is our interpretation using the geologic interpretation software of what is that saturated sand thickness that is used in the SB5 calculations. SB5 is overlying land ownership, net sands, specific yield divided by 100 years. And they do 100 years so you can get an annual allocation. What we do here is look based upon those actual logs. Is it what the state says from the specific yield or for the saturated sands, or is it something different? And we can really get into that data and show that this is, in these areas 60 feet versus the state might say it's 80 feet in the decree. Now, this is not in any way, shape, or form to take away a legal right. I mean, that's SB5, that's the state law, that's how they do it. This is to give folks an idea of, is the 80 feet that the state says in the decree really water that's going to come out? Is it really going to be producible, or is it something less? Again, it's a tool to give the county an opportunity to look at, well, if someone's relying on the Upper Arapahoe Aquifer, for example, is it really something that's going to be good for a subdivision in a specific part of the county that's coming in? The other thing we can do here is in the county, at least in Douglas County, there isn't a ton of logs that have been developed into the Fox Hills or into the Arapahoe. I mean, they're very deep. I mean, let's face it. But we do have some data in there, and we would use this, again, this model and these techniques to see is there other data out there, whether it be oil and gas, whether it be exploratory, whatever it might be, to really kind of get a look at what those aquifers are and try to fill in those gaps. So that's just to give you an idea of what we've put together. Whoops, and the whole point of that, I hit the wrong button, didn't I? That one. There we go. Sorry. Hit the wrong button. So I'll turn it over to Will again for some disclosures and if there's questions and discussion.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Just by way of disclosure, wanted to mention to you that our firms have client relationships within Douglas County, and so I wanted you to be aware of that. None that we see as any type of conflict of interest, but just wanted to make you aware. So with that, I know we maybe have a couple minutes for questions and discussion. So at the pleasure of the commission.
And as staff, if you don't mind, Jack, I apologize. As staff, just again, a friendly reminder, please make sure those mics are close to your mouth and announce your name when you start to speak, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Clark Hamelman. You mentioned early on that Centennial, Parker, and Castle Rock all have, I can't remember how you described it, but long-term water plans. How do you recommend that those be incorporated, without reinventing the wheel and, without spending county money unnecessarily?
Right. I think it would be a matter of referencing the information from the South Metro documents and saying that's kind of a given on those supplies. And maybe those supplies can be extended further beyond those service areas. That's obviously up to those districts going forward. But what are the assets that they're putting together, and how does that fit into the overall picture? And so I think it'd be a matter of documenting what's already there. Through the documentation that's already there on planning documents and everything, that we would just reference that information as part of the county plan and not reinvent it, as you say.
Jack?
Don?
Yeah, Don Langley. I just want to make sure I'm clear that the data that you use to drive the Petra model is carried over from the well logs, from the original well construction? Is that where all that data is coming from?
Yes, it's coming from the state engineer well logs, they get the geophysical logs on the large capacity wells, as well as other public available data, whether it be COGCC or I don't know what they call themselves now, but the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. If there's any out there, there's other exploratory wells that may have been out there. There's other data that might have been for, like, back in the day, coal mining, like maybe not here, but like up near Lafayette and that, where the people have done various public, geophysical logging to kind of see what's under the ground. Another piece of information we've seen, it may not be applicable here in Douglas County, but it was at Arapahoe County, and we've done some look at it, is the oil and gas companies, they do 3D seismic. And that's another data point that we can get from those oil and gas companies. We don't get what they want to do for the reserve, 5,000 feet below the surface, but they could care less about what's going on for the water, so we can use those files too. So it comes from a lot of different public resources.
So, and it's all public resource data?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Evan?
Yeah, Evan Ela. As a follow-up to that, so when you complete this Petra model and get these results, is it linked so that as additional data comes into existence over a number of years, it updates automatically, or does the county have to come back and have you redo the whole model again?
Yeah, you wouldn't have to redo the whole model again because we'd be using those geophysical logs. We could come in back and fill in if there's a data gap. I don't know if you recall when I pulled that just example that we used for a cross-section, there was one geophysical log that didn't get down to the Fox Hills. Well, maybe there'll be one that comes in the future, and that can be easily adjusted really quickly. It doesn't update automatically, unfortunately, just because those are those paper records that come into the state engineer's office, and we have to look at them digitally and then kind of put them in there. But it's not once it's built and once we evaluate it, it's very quick to put new data.
So there are advantages to having the established boundaries and the data points that are known and some of those kinds of things, so that you can update easily.
Absolutely.
And at a lesser cost than building it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what we would look at, is trying to where we could. That's why we strategically put those cross sections across each county to kind of where we know those things are going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Frank?
Yeah, Frank Johns. Along the same line, so Centennial Water and Sand District is looking at doing a third-party review of some of their groundwater analysis and things like that. Their models, there's uncertainties. So will you be able to tell us, here's areas where there's big uncertainties, and here may be ways we can close that, what recommendations would be?
That would be the intent of the geophysical modeling or the geological interpretation modeling, is to give you that finer point. Obviously, it's groundwater. We don't know for sure what's under the ground, but we can, when we're stitching these things together, we can give a better picture. It's a tool in the toolbox to really kind of figure out what's there. Are there any holes or any gaps? Is there more water there? I mean, the state, we've talked to the state a lot about using this geologic interpretation software, and they like it because, unfortunately, with the state, there are a lot of big chief tablets and crayons as they string things out across the wall trying to interpret it. I mean, they're doing a great job, but this can do it a lot quicker, fill in data gaps, as well as, allow a developer to come in or the county to say, yeah, this doesn't look good. I think you need to put a well in the ground and actually get a real good data point, because what we're seeing is not good, and show us some real data. But yes, that's the intent, is to give the county that tool to make those decisions.
Roger?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming and for your presentation. I really appreciate it. It was understandable for those of us, me. It's not an engineer, so thank you for that. As you have completed the water studies in our neighboring counties, and we're just beginning this process, what did you learn from those two that we might need to know as we're beginning this one here? Is there something as we begin this process that you learned that we would possibly make a mistake, or something we should know that we would go afoul on, that we could maybe stop and correct now at this stage?
I feel like you guys are on a good track with what you've defined to this point, and certainly we've learned along the way, and so that's, for example, how we've developed the concept of these production factors is through doing this type of work, and there's certainly expectations of individual well owners out there in terms of having new development next to them. There's concerns there to be worked through. There's things that we've talked about with the public as well, and ways that we've been able to present it, things I think that will, can help keep people's mind at ease a little more so. There's some lessons like that along the way that we've learned.
Harold?
Smethels, and this is a good analysis. One question as I look at your charts, will you be able to predict at present pumping rates, 30, 40 years out? Our job is 30 years old, where we anticipate sore spots or even crisis water usage.
Yeah, I mean, the geologic interpretation software gives us a good idea of what the aquifer can or cannot do. But that's a complicated analysis based upon, what's the piezometric head. I mean, a lot of folks, that's one of the things that we learned from these other studies is that, the aquifer is going dry. Well, it's not. It's the piezometric head, which is the pressure head in the well bore. Yeah, that's getting pumped off very quickly. We've seen that. We've seen that in Denver, where they used to have the Denver Basin aquifers run the elevators up and down. Well, that's not there anymore. The pressure's gone, or some of the pressure's gone. Now we're really looking at the aquifer itself. What is that aquifer going to do? There's going to be obviously isolated pockets, so there's going to be some draining of some aquifers, but we have to realize that when the state came in and said, 100-year aquifer life, that's not an aquifer life. It was a tool by the legislature to figure out how to take a quantification underlying a piece of property and get it into an annual diversion. That's all it was. Granted, if you take a wall and you put it around someone's property and you put it all the way down to bedrock, arguably there's 100-year of water in there based upon the engineering calculations. But we know groundwater comes in from 360 degrees. And we've seen in Highlands Ranch, back in the 90s, we had those really, really, stressed aquifers and those stressed wells. When we started reducing the pumping on that, we saw the water levels rebound. That's what we're going to see, and I think that's what we can show with this geologic interpretation. How are these aquifers going to respond? Are they going to dry quickly? Do we see any piezometric head? Or is it just in the aquifer now? Because we're going to see a lot less decline once we get to the aquifer versus the piezometric head. So that's what this whole analysis would look at, trying to really kind of understand that. And there are some complex areas here in the county. When you get up along the hogback there, I shouldn't say the hogback, but along the mountainous area, that's where the outcrop comes in. That's really complicated. And the county's already done a really good job of figuring out Zone A and Zone B in that area. Can that be refined with better data? That's what we'd be looking at trying to do.
Sean?
Sean Towner. Am I on? Yep. Sean Towner, piggyback on Harold's question. So when you're doing this analysis of current pumping rates or well production, do you bounce that against the decreed amount of water available for that well?
Yes, that's one thing that we would look at. Obviously, again, any of these analysis we do, we will not take away a decreed amount, state engineer issued order, or any of that line. That's all protected by state law. What we would be trying to do is say, okay, hey, your decrease is 100 acre feet. Are you really going to get 100 acre foot out of that well? I mean, our experience has been, hey, we'll get a 150 gallon a minute well out of the Fox Hills. Maybe you'll get 20. Those are what we're going to be trying to do with this geologic interpretation. Really understanding, yeah, your decree says 200 acre feet. We're not taking that away from you. But with a single well, are you going to be able to get that 200 acre feet from under the ground? Well, maybe, maybe not. You might have to put in 5, 6, 7 wells. Well, now you start to get well-to-well interference. And there's a cost issue. I mean, someone going down to 2,000 feet with 5 wells, you're talking a lot of money. So how is that going to work? So those are the type of questions that we would be trying to answer with this and giving the county that tool when a developer does come in or someone's looking at a different water supply. How is that going to be managed? How is that going to be looked at?
Evan?
Yeah, thanks. Evan Ela, another follow-up on that is, do you envision as one of the deliverables being a map that shows the degree of the groundwater that's under decree or isn't, and areas of the county that are under decree and aren't, and just to get a kind of a quantification of some of that activity?
Absolutely. I didn't show it here. We just didn't have the time. That's part of that interactive map. It is a line item that says, here's your non-tributary areas of the county. Here's your not non-tributary areas. Here's your not non-tributary 4%, all from state engineer data, as well as pulling all the decreed amounts that have come from the water courts that are outlined for each and every aquifer. So yeah, and you'll be able to click on that and it pulls up, here's your decree. That's, this is the decree for this specific land area. What does it look like? What is that, now how does that look like with the cross-section, if a cross-section goes through there? Does it really make sense? That's the data we want to link together. Make it user-friendly. So, the complaints I've heard, and I used to work at the state engineer's office for a long time, is I can't find a darn thing on that damn website. It's like I can go find my well permit once in a while, but there's a lot of good data out there, and the state does a great job, but it is hard to find sometimes. And we want to bring that in, make it easy for folks to really take a look at. What does my well look like? Is it completed?
Tricia?
Yeah, I was just going to, on that same subject, do you feel like you have enough data in Douglas County to do a good analysis without doing any additional testing or well drilling? I am assuming the answer is yes?
For sure, in the shallower aquifers, being the Dawson, the Denver, and probably the Arapahoe. As you start getting down into maybe Arapahoe, questionable. Fox Hills is another one that's, there just hasn't been tapped into a lot. But there is, like I said, a lot of other data out there besides just SEO data. And that's what we would be trying to really look at, to really pull that data together. As I stand here today, I do think there's quite a bit of data that we can pull. We've looked at the Fox Hills in various communities. We've looked at the Arapahoe in various communities. And that's all, like I said, public data with the state engineer's office. So yes, I believe there is enough data. And that might be one of the recommendations. We got a void in XYZ area. We may need to figure that out. Is this something to do with the USGS? Can we work with the USGS for water levels or for what have you? So those are some of the things that we would bring back if there is a data gap.
So we have courtesy for our other presenter. We are by a time thing that we're getting up against the wall. So the last question, James?
James Eklund, thank you. You've got a Gantt chart in your materials that you provided to us, and thank you for that and for this presentation. Great job. It estimates a 24-month planning horizon. That would be my first question, would be, as we come up with an RFP, are there timing issues that you as a prospective proposer would want to hear from us in terms of guidance on timing? I know how important that is to an application or a proposal.
Yeah, we would have a kickoff meeting with you and go through what our data needs are up front, our background documents that we have to review, and go through that, make sure we get our arms around all the available information for part of it, and then identify what else needs to be collected during that period, the upcoming period. Obviously, if there's a lot of interviews we have to do with water providers, that takes some time, those kinds of things that would work into the schedule.
And then my last question is a state of the science question. Where is artificial intelligence plugging into engineering calculations for groundwater modeling, if at all? And if it is there an opportunity to harness that capability with this project?
That's a great question. We are looking into that. As of right now, we haven't used AI in these types of applications before. AI looks at past data and try to pull things together. In the state engineer's office, if you recall, they basically put these geophysical laws up on the wall and draw things with crayons. This is the new technology. So yes, I do see AI being a part of this moving forward as that can work. But also, it's sometimes scary using AI when you're trying to do groundwater and trying to do water analysis, because it's not cut and dry. It's not black and white.
Okay. At this point in time, I would like to say thank you guys very much for that information. I think it was very informative. Appreciate it. So at this point, we would like to move on and would invite INTERA to please come forward and introduce yourselves, your team, and look forward to hearing from you.
Good evening. I am Courtney Black with INTERA, and I have Shannon Musala here with INTERA and Shelby Summer with Brendel Group. And we are really Sorry, I'm leaning in here to make sure I'm heard. We're really excited to be here, and we thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. So we're going to just start off defining the problem with how we see it. One of the main questions that we understand of the study is, what is the health of the underlying aquifers? And this is a complex, multi-dimensional question, and in reality, it depends. There's a timing component. When you start thinking about the future, what is it going to bring? Are we going to have less pumping? Is it going to be business as usual? Or are we going to have more pumping? And in addition to that, with the timing, we also have a spatial aspect. As we all know, Douglas County is quite diverse. And then when you start looking into the subsurface and exploring it, you've got, the purple here is representative of the Denver groundwater basin. And you have obviously the 4 different main aquifer systems within that, and then you have the fractured granite bedrock in the mountainous areas. And then you overlay the main wells within the region, and the green here is denoting more the shallower wells representative of the alluvial aquifer systems, and then you've got the deeper wells and the bedrock aquifers, and there's just a lot of heterogeneity. So very multi-dimensional, not an easy problem. And so you had asked us to address 3 questions. And so we're going to go through these throughout our presentation. The first one is provide input regarding best practices to measure groundwater supply based on the planning horizons proposed in the scope of work. And so our best way of kind of approaching that is really just to say that overall the 7 tasks we have here are really based on the latest best practices moving forward. And I wanted to note the first, it's really kind of showing up as black here on the slide, or black or navy blue arrow, the big arrow there. And we just really want to emphasize the importance here when it comes to the stakeholder engagement and the public outreach piece of things. There's a variety of layers here when we're talking about stakeholder. We have obviously a Douglas County Water Commission, Douglas County commissioners, water providers of all different sizes, well owners in the region. So being able to develop a good comprehensive process based on what's worked well in Douglas County in the past will be an important piece. In addition to these, there's 4, I guess I want to draw your attention to the 4 light blue boxes here, task 1, 2, 3, and 4. Task 1 is a land use planning. Shelby's going to speak more to that. Her background is in land use planning as well as a lot of different stakeholder engagement. And then we have task 2, water demand forecasting. Task 3, reliance on non-renewable groundwater, which you can also just look at that as the amount of pumping in the region, both now and in the future. And then we also have a scenario development task here, and that's really addressing the large number of uncertainties of when we start thinking about what the future could bring. And so land use planning, you have type of land use, level of growth, water demand forecasting. There's a lot of different things that influence forecasts. There's a warming climate, there is conservation and so forth. And the reliance on non-renewable groundwater of what sort of renewable supplies are coming into the region, are planned for the region, how will reuse play out. And so scenarios is a way of working with all of you and developing a means of being able to bracket that. Shannon Musla is going to speak to the groundwater analysis, and then we also have an outcomes or potential solutions task here, as well as developing the plan itself. So Shelby, I'll pass it over to you.
So as Courtney mentioned, my name is Shelby Summer, and I'm the Director of Planning and Engagement at Brundle Group. And so I get to talk to you about my favorite topic, which is land use planning. So a lot of the other tasks and pieces you're going to hear from our team as well as the previous team talked about solving for the problem of how much water is there. I think land use planning is a tool to help us explore how much water do we need. And so I invite you to just think about enhancing the RFP to really clarify the role of land use planning in this process and really be at the forefront of Colorado counties. So when we think about future land use in particular, the county has a great comprehensive plan which spells out across the county and the municipalities what's going to go where and sort of to what degree. So one of the first steps in this analysis will really be creating this tapestry of future land use. You can get as specific as you want. This could be a task that's pretty high level or very granular at the parcel level. We're going to need to explore what to use as the basis for the analysis. It might be zoning, it might be future land use. There are a number of different designations that apply that will inform the assumptions that are made. We're also going to need to have a conversation about how specific do we get? Do we create some general categories to apply across the county, or do we use the municipality-specific designations and have a lot of different categories? Ultimately, we're using that future land use map to answer the questions of how many people, at what densities, where are jobs going to be, and how much water are they going to use. So once we have that future land use map kind of settled, we'll start working on the assumptions. It's a big multiplication problem. So we'll start identifying which areas are going to be developed in the future. We're also going to identify what's going to stay as is. We can get into specifics around lot size and landscape areas, et cetera. And there are some tools that are already at play. So once we do this big multiplication problem with all of the different assumptions, that will get to a build out. That's if everything under the sun develops at full capacity. We're going to use some tools to then forecast back to 2050 or certain intervals in time, because we don't think that it's realistic that the entire county will be built out by 2050. So we're going to need to create some ways to step back to 2050. So one tool is the DRCOG Regional Transportation Model. They've already done population and employment forecasting. That's a really rough tool, but we could use it to help kind of dial in those assumptions. The other image is showing some development approvals that get really specific down to the units. So that's just another example. So there's a huge spectrum of possibility of how deep do we go with this future land use analysis. So I encourage you in the RFP to really coordinate with the planning department. You have excellent staff, and I think they probably have some intel and knowledge to offer to this to this process, and maybe a tool to help keep costs contained for this part of the analysis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Courtney.
Okay, so now into the water demand forecasting pieces of things. So as Shelby had spoken to, we can go with more of a simple approach with, say, DRCOG, or we could go to a much more comprehensive process of starting to looking at specific plans themselves. Regardless, we'll come out with what we can call as drivers. That could be the number of households, it can be population, SFEs, employment, acres. Those drivers will help inform what we'd be using for unit water use, which is essentially, ultimately, we'll be taking the drivers, multiplying it by unit water use to come up with a volumetric water demand. Most simple way to say that, which I think many of you are familiar with this method, is taking population, multiplying it by per capita water use to come up with a volumetric estimate. That's one approach. There's obviously different ways. Ultimately, we'd be using a variety of information. I'll be discussing going out to the providers with a survey and getting data, so that will be one method. And then really going back and validating the data and truth checking it with other publicly available information. There's conservation plans, water resource master plans. Just coupled with our experience, both INTERA and Brendel Group have done a lot of conservation planning, have a lot of experience with water demand forecasting as well. And then just overall your input as we go through the process. Reliance on non-renewable groundwater, or in other words, level of pumping here. Here's the official equation for the presentation. We've got the non-renewable groundwater reliance is basically equal to what the water demands would be, minus renewable supplies and minus reuse. So we're really starting to hone down on, in the timing horizons you had specified in RFI of existing, 2050, and at build out, what sort of pumping could we be seeing? And that would be largely available using the same sort of data sources with the survey I'd mentioned, publicly available information, and with our professional expertise and stakeholder input. I do want to mention how important existing relationships really matter when it comes to getting data. And across the band of the below, INTERA has been working with South Metro Water Supply Authority on doing a regional ASR study. So we have definitely a strong history working with South Metro. and as well as with Centennial and Castle Rock on that project. We're also developing Parker's conservation plan right now, as well as working with Dominion on having recently completed their drought plan and on their conservation plan too. So those are just a spectrum of some of those relationships we do have. The scenario development I had mentioned, this would be task 4. The dark navy boxes here, we have increased pumping, business as usual, decreased pumping. This is by no means what the scenarios would be, but it's just to give you a conceptual idea of where this exercise could go. So ultimately looking at high scenario, low scenario, maybe some things in the middle. And ultimately at the end of task 4, we would come out with that timing piece again of really understanding how much pumping would we need across the different existing 2050 build-out timing horizons for each scenario, as well as understanding more spatially, since we will be gathering data from different providers throughout the county, and better understanding what that pumping level would be. Okay, I'm handing it over to Shada now.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and I would like to thank all of you for inviting us down here to talk about the scope. Appreciate that. So I've got 5 or 6 or 7 slides, I believe. You've seen this table. It's the same table that we included in the proposal. And basically what it has the focus areas that we think the groundwater analysis should focus on and should address. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This should be updated based on feedback from stakeholders, based on the data that would be collected during the course of the groundwater study. Now, Courtney addressed the first one. Now, areas with wells that have gone dry or maybe reduction of supplies should be focused on and should be the subject of the groundwater study. Areas with relatively high pumping should also be flagged and be addressed in this groundwater study. These are the areas that might be trouble areas in the future, so we should pay attention to those. Now, there is plenty of data out there, so we came up with the list that you see here on the left with multiple studies that were done, data sources. So our recommendation to you is to use at least this data set plus these studies plus other sources of data that's out there. Now, there is plenty of data out there, publicly available. There is a lot of data that were collected by the water providers in terms of water levels, pumping, water quality data. We have collected some of these data. As Courtney mentioned, we have been working on this aquifer storage and recovery study for some time now. We finalized the phase 1. The map that you see here is basically some of the data that we collected specifically in this area from Castle Rock and Centennial Water and Sanitation District. Now, there is also other studies that we've looked at and reviewed. Some of these studies, really good studies, were done by state, were done by the USGS. Some were done by the Rural Water Authority of Douglas County as well that should be considered. That's what we're thinking. Next, long-term impacts. We think they should be investigated, at least in those vulnerable areas that will be identified in Douglas County. Now, you can look at historical data and kind of look at trends and try to make some judgment calls to kind of predict the future or how the future might look like. But really, to be able to predict the future, you need a groundwater model to allow you to do that. And our suggestion to you is to use the USGS groundwater model that was developed about 10 years or so ago by the USGS. We have used this same exact model just recently for one of the studies that we did for ECCV, East Cherry Creek Valley Water and Sanitation District, and we found the model to be representative in the area, the service area of ECCV, with some tweaks. Now, what we recommend to you is to use the same model and recalibrate the model, which can be done very easily and in very efficient manner, at least for those vulnerable areas that will be identified within the county. Now, I talked about the Denver Basin aquifer. What about those fractured granite system that is located to the west and southwest of the county? Special situation for those. We those the supplies, the water supplies from those wells is really highly dependent on the local conditions, highly dependent, specifically the recharge from nearby surface water bodies like creeks and so on, and precip, of course. So our recommendation is to really do site-specific analysis to address those vulnerable areas up there. Now, looking at water quality assessment, there's multiple sources out there. There's the USGS, there's the state data, there's other sources as well and studies. Here's a map that we put together last week just for this presentation using USGS well sites with water quality data, radium, TDS, and other constituents of concern. Now, I'm sure all of you would agree with me that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here's just an example from one of the regional groundwater studies that we did. And the groundwater system is so complex. It's just easier always to look at a picture like this, or maybe a 2D picture to kind of understand what's going on with the groundwater. Because we don't see it, it's just easier to look at these things and kind of make some sense of it, out of it. Now, what we recommend to you is any data collected, any interpretation of that data, any modeling results be represented. Doesn't have to be 3D, but at least 2D, two-dimensional figures or pictures, or a 3D representation like the one you see here. So you're looking at like the different layers in the aquifer. You're looking at the wells that go through these layers. So here's another 3D representation for another project that we worked on, another regional groundwater project that we did. And let me mention this. In the last 50 years of INTERA's history, we have worked on literally hundreds of regional groundwater modeling studies for which we developed models. We estimated groundwater availability for current conditions and future conditions. Now, I mentioned the USGS model, and just to be specific, what we recommend, and this is what we did for other clients, is to take the model and recalibrate it to these, in these vulnerable areas using the last 10 years of data. And this is a map showing basically locations with water levels data that were collected the last 10 years. So our recommendation, let's just look at the most recent, last 10 years, recalibrate the model, make sure the model is doing a good job within these vulnerable areas so we can come up with reliable results that we can rely on. Now, if you look at this, you're going to see gaps in data. And I guarantee you, once you focus and zoom in one of these vulnerable areas, you're going to see not only gaps spatially, but also gaps temporally. So the question is, what would you do, how to deal with these gaps? Well, our recommendation is to use a tool that was actually developed by INTERA, which is used by many, many consultants all over the world. It was developed by Dr. Jeremy White of INTERA, who came to us from the USGS. It's called PIS++ IES. And it basically, what it does, it uses nonlinear functions. It uses relationships between aquifer parameters and data of concern, like water levels, as an example. And based on those, it basically uses the best science out there. Using these relationships, we can decide, we can zoom in and look at a specific area and say, okay, do we have enough data points to allow us to have a good prediction using the model that we have in this area? If we don't, then what do we need to do? Maybe by adding one data point, so we can do these assessments using this tool and say, yeah, maybe by adding one data point here, specific location, we would increase the reliability of the model by this much, or maybe 2 data points, or maybe 3 data points. All of this can be done very efficiently. The other couple of things I want to mention about the tool, we can use the tool to, of course, with expert judgment associated with that, we can recalibrate the USGS model very efficiently. And also what this tool does, it self-documents itself. So basically, any of the process that we go through, calibration process, can be reproducible by anyone. I think that's it. Back to you.
Thank you, Chad. So when it comes to output of data and what kind of results are you expecting on seeing, this is an example of a groundwater basin out in California. We've done extensive level of modeling out there, particularly around SGMA, it's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. One part of that act is for each basin it's a stakeholder effort to come up with sustainable groundwater levels or thresholds. And so just to point you to those red dots, which are representative of wells that are below the sustainable groundwater level that have dried up. The yellow dots are representative of wells that are still operational, but they have groundwater levels below those sustainable groundwater thresholds. And then just also draw your attention to the contours here, which are showing declines in groundwater levels from 2022. So this is just to kind of give you a general understanding of some of the things that we'd be targeting as a spatial imagery from model runs at the end of the day that are starting to give a clear depiction of what's going on across Douglas County now, what could it look like in 2050, and then also a build out based on the different scenarios and all the other information that we'll have gathered as model input for tasks 1 through 4. Back to these questions. Second question was how to enhance tasks associated with detailed data needs to thoroughly model the groundwater supplies. So when it comes to the data collection process, we're thinking of using the same approach that we've used with the South Metro Regional ASR study that's proven really quite well. And that was to really bring the providers involved in the study. We have a technical committee to come in and be a part of the study. It helps with relationships, transparency, trust, and for them to understand how their data is going to be used and why it's being used. And so having that sort of outreach was fundamentally important. So we'd be using that same sort of process for across the board when it comes to land use, conservation and demands, renewable reuse supplies, as well as a lot of the detailed groundwater data that Shad had mentioned. We've already collected a lot of this data for Centennial as well as for Castle Rock at this point in time. Then it'd be important to, after we have that information, to take a step back, validate that information, identify data gaps, inconsistencies, and follow back up on one-on-one conversations with the providers. We found this to be really effective with the Regional ASR project. And then, of course, there'll still likely need to be additional assumptions and some refinements as we're moving forward. That's an active, dynamic process. Last question. Recommendations is how risk factors may be included in this analysis. We took a step back. We're like, well, what does this question mean by risks? And so we came up with 3 categories of risks. One is uncertainties of the future, and that's really where a lot of the scenario planning comes into play to address that. The other one is just risks when you start thinking about natural hazards. Flood, wildfire, health and safety, drought. A lot of these do follow under with the jurisdiction of Douglas County and what you guys do as a county. And so just being able to aware and knowing of the other planning efforts out there that Douglas County has, your hazard mitigation plan, for instance, and making sure that this planning effort is in relationship with that and that they're synced is an important aspect of the project. And last but not least, project risks. These are generally inherent in every project at various levels. We have the data risk, the availability, the transparency, the accuracy, which I just spoke to you about in a previous slide. Modeling and evaluation, addressing data gaps and predictive capabilities. Shannon just spoke to you about PEST from the modeling standpoint. That can help address some of that. And then the observations, which in a lot of ways I feel is sometimes more of an art than a science, of really thinking how are we going to portray the results, how are we going to message it, how can it be interpreted, and what are the findings and next steps. And that's a fundamental piece of working with all of you as we work through the process and making sure that we are working together and getting the feedback and input to make that necessary and happen well. And then when it comes to the potential solutions, this really is, to be complementary to what Douglas County's vision is, some initial brainstorming of what that can be, county-sponsored programs, additional studies, commission-led future partnerships, policy recommendations is a big one, particularly around land use that Shelby can provide a lot of guidance on, and then leveraging additional studies out there, such as the Regional ASR study moving forward and making sure we're collaborating. So at the end of the day, I think we think a lot of the elements to success here is bringing experts to the table, the consulting team here, working with all of you in that stakeholder collaboration piece of things, as well as just that dynamic innovation that's needed as we walk through such a multi-dimensional, exciting project as this. So we're happy to address any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions? James.
Thank you. Great. Oh, sorry. James Eklund. Thank you. Great presentation. I'll kind of get back to the computational challenges of running PEST, P-E-S-T. As you know, the complexity and scale of the Denver Basin is quite high and challenging. And I'm wondering, are there concerns about the number of model runs required and the computational capability? And then I'll just fold in my AI question that I asked the last team. Is there a way to reduce the computational challenge with running such a high-powered model on such a complex aquifer system with AI?
Well, so a couple of things related to that. One is with PEST, honestly, this is what we do. I mean, we have all the capabilities that we need to run models like these because we've been doing this thing for the last 50 years. So, so no concerns about that. And even with the heterogeneity, with the aquifer system here, just because we're starting with the pre-made model, I mean, we're not starting from scratch, really. We have a model. We just need to verify it in these vulnerable areas to make sure it's doing right thing. But back to your question, running the model using PEST, there shouldn't be any problem. I mean, this thing can run hundreds and thousands of runs. And we do have, at INTERA, we have all the capabilities in-house to run such thing because we just do it every day. We do a lot of these projects. The AI question, we have an AI initiative at INTERA. We've been thinking about that for the last year or so. We're still thinking about risks associated with that. So we haven't really made a decision on like, hey, let's go with this. But we've been talking about it quite a bit, honestly. And I understand this is the future, but we might be actually, we are actually doing some AI, but it's in a different matter. But it is in our heads.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Evan?
Yes, Evan Ela. So it sounds like you have some experience with ASR here in the locality region. Should our RFP devote any time, or should our study, or Douglas County Water Study, devote some time to the feasibility of that, or locating sites of that, and what kind of capacity is conceivably out there for using ASR?
I can take a first start.
Sure.
Okay. Well, there are a number of entities in Douglas County that have or are in the process of seeking permitting through the EPA on that. I want to say like 7 or 8 off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at the actual report. So in terms of, and then the regional ASR project really focused on, well, everyone can go and do their own thing, which I think is good and important to do. But in addition, the main question is, what if we were able to really collaborate? So if we get and we're thinking 30, 40 years out of the line, if we get a huge plug of renewable water coming in from whatever sources they may be at that point in time, can we have the capacity in the South Metro region to be able to store that water and not forego that water in general? So that's just the South Metro ASR study, if you want to elaborate.
Well, I mean, based on what Courtney just said, I mean, the whole idea behind the ASR study is collaboration. So basically, people sharing water and storing, water in each other's reservoirs underground, and, let's just collaborate and make it optimal for everybody. So back to your question, I think ASR should be looked into within Douglas County. I mean, of course, it depends on what location are we talking about, but it should be at least, you should think about. That's our recommendation, because it might be a valuable. I mean, there's all sorts of pluses to ASR that all of us know, no evaporation losses. It's little, it's cheaper than constructing a surface reservoir. And there's many other things. I don't want to go through that. But the short answer is this would be our recommendation, to look into maybe feasibility studies and look at feasibility of ASR at different locations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess I was asking if, I realize there's a lot of institutional and regulatory constraints you got to overcome for ASR. And you do have to have cooperation across jurisdictions, certainly, to try and do it at scale. But it just seems to me that is something that should be a component of a water plan, to see what, how feasible is this, or is it impossible to overcome some of these institutional hurdles? So yes, thanks for your answer. The second thing, the USGS model, does it have a way to distinguish, or either through the use of it or in some way to distinguish about the difference between the piezometric head in the Denver Basin Aquifer versus the water table head?
Yes. It actually, what it does, it simulates when you go from confined, we've seen this throughout actually. Sometimes, when the water levels go down, you're switching basically from a confined system, pressurized system, piezometric system, into more like a, unsaturated system. So basically, and this is two different things between these two in terms of how much storage you would gain out of system 1 compared to system 2. We've seen that, under Centennial Water and Sanitation District. We've seen it other places. So yes, to answer your question, it does explicitly take care of that. Yes.
Any other questions? Tricia?
Just the visual examples were really interesting and fun. Would there be any opportunity for you to develop a system that the public could actually look at interactively and see the location of their well and that type of thing? Is that just over the top? There's no way that, I'm just asking.
I didn't get some of it, so can you?
So is there any way to make it an interactive visual assessment? As you were showing us, would the public be able to get into your system or the system that you develop and look at the location of their individual wells?
Yes, so looking at the model, actually, it has a GUI to it. So you can actually focus in certain area and kind of look at what wells are located here and how much capacity those wells have. And, aquifer parameters as well. So you can do that. But I'm going to be frank with you. This is not, you need somebody who understands, how that works. So I wouldn't recommend, like, for someone who doesn't have any groundwater expertise to go in and start kind of, looking around to trying to understand. But yeah, it has a GUI, and you can zoom in and, it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't. Well, it depends. It depends. But I would say yes, but it depends.
Anybody else? I want to thank you very much. Great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind the commission that we will be, take your notes, don't forget them. Put them down, add any more notes you may have, because as we come in next month, we're going to start looking at revising, revamping, and reviewing the RFP as it's currently structured to ensure that we incorporate things that we may have discovered today and we may not have known was available in the past. So I think those are things that we really need to begin that process with, okay? Sean.
Sean Tonner. Chair, is the goal out of the next meeting, us going through what we need to add to the RFP, to get the RFP in a final format to get to staff? Is that the goal of the next meeting?
The goal was to get that done 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of leading the leading question is putting a little spur on the horse here.
I hear it. Am I supposed to neigh at this point? But anyhow,
your choice.
No. The answer is, I don't we're at a critical point right now, in my opinion, with the RFP. It's got to be structured right, because it's going to be difficult to not get that out. And then what's going to happen is we're going to end up with a lot of questions going back out, and which are going to cause delay. So I think the answer is I can't give you a definitive. It just depends how far we go. I think we need to concentrate right here, right now, and get that right so that we can give the TAC, our advisory committee, the tools and the information that the rest of us have come up with to say, listen, please incorporate this, and then come back with that final tool. My envision would probably be, if we can get that influenced sufficiently at that point, then we would entertain it. But otherwise, I would say at the latest would be October, at the latest.
So just for clarification, at the next meeting, we hammer out additional pieces we want, kicks it to the TAC in the interim, then we come back for the October meeting to push it out? Is that?
I would think that's probably a more realistic view, because it's going to make us take a look at it in the way that we need to take that look at it, okay?
Thank you.
Tricia?
Have we identified a TAC?
Well, I thought we already had an RFP group that was tagged.
Okay.
You, me, and Don, I think
Two,
you
Okay.
can't
Same-
get off
same
the
one.
hook.
Okay, fine. Happy to do it.
Yeah, I didn't, the committee was not shot yet, so. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to staff as we move into the next item on our agenda, which is regarding the Pine Canyon Plan Development Water Appeal that the commissioners asked us to, make comments about. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but we're going to see what that is at that point. But I have to turn it over to legal first, I've been advised. Yes,
Chair?
sir. Yes, sir.
Before we start that, I'd actually like to make a motion before that. I'd rather not take this up. I'm not alone in that, because I've had these conversations with other members one-on-one. And of course, we'll allow you to, after I make my motion, of course, there'll be discussion, I'm sure, about it. I'd like to make a motion, and I'll explain why I want to. This is a quasi-judicial appeal currently in front of the commission. And because of that, I don't believe it should have a public forum right now in this arena. There is currently no mechanism for this referral to this body. And to do it out of, with no previous history and no contemplated future history of us looking at or discussing, there's no metric for us to have this conversation. We could end up costing the citizens of Douglas County a lot of money in a lawsuit by what our opinion is as a body that's been appointed by the commission. I would like for us to not have this discussion. It should not be on this agenda, in my opinion, nor should it have been part of an email that began what I would say is a meeting that should have not taken place, not part of the sunshine laws of Colorado, and that has already taken place. So I move that we remove this from the agenda.
So we have a motion to suspend the actual issue of removing it. The agenda is at the front. So what we would have to ask you to do is, it would actually be to indefinitely table this particular item.
I'm good with that, indefinitely.
Okay.
I'm good with
Frank?
that. Second.
So we have a motion and we have a second. However, we're not going to jump to a vote. Now we're going to open this up for discussion.
Just a point of order,
James.
Mr. Chairman. I'm going to recuse myself from this agenda item at the request, or after discussing this with council. As you guys know, my firm is old, and it's represented. Probably, if you've done a bond issue in this county, my firm has probably done it, and I've represented, and my firm's represented the Pine Canyon development prior to this commission even being formed. So I'm going to recuse myself, and I've been told that the best way to do that is to actually leave the room, so I'm not accused of
Several of us may be following you soon.
That's I'm not getting up in protest. I'm just that's my explanation.
So,
See you next month.
Thank you.
So let me just tell you how we're going to proceed then, if this is going to be good enough with the motioner and the second person at this point. I think we're going to have to open this up for discussion, obviously, this particular item, the motion only, not the topic, but the motion, which is to not address this particular item and to indefinitely table this. But before I do that, I have an obligation here, because we're in the discussion phase, to refer to legal, and there might be a commissioner who would just like to make a comment too, which is part of the phase at this point. So, Mr. Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. Chris Pratt with the County Attorney's Office. I just would like to say preliminarily here, I think before you can make a decision on that motion, you should hear what the plan is. I think that will answer some of the concerns that were mentioned as part of the motion. And as you mentioned, there is a commissioner here who can speak to what the board was thinking when they directed staff to put this item on your agenda. This is not something that staff brought before you, or that was sua sponte brought to you. This is something that we were specifically directed to bring to you at this meeting. The county commissioners indicated a desire to give this body an opportunity to comment on an item that was coming before them. But before I get into that and how we envision implementing that direction from the Board of County Commissioners, I'd like to give Commissioner Teal an opportunity to address you. He has asked for such a...
We're wasting our time. He's wasting our time.
Yeah, well,
I disagree.
I think we're in a discussion point, and I think out of courtesy, I understand what you're saying. I think we need to do this, Frank, but...
Well, thank you, Commissioners. George Teal, Douglas County Commissioner, representing District 2. The balance of the Board of County Commissioners has asked for an opinion on the review of the Pine Canyon Plan Development Water Appeal that will come before the board as a part of our land use process here in Douglas County. It is the opinion of the balance of the Board of County Commissioners. This is work that the commission can count on. Commissioner Hudson, you did say something that was incorrect, in that this is work that, this is something that will not come before the board, before the commission in the future. I do have to tell you that is incorrect. The Board of County Commissioners have already started the process with staff to modify the land use process here in the county to request the referral and the opinion of the Water Commission as all items pertaining to water come before the Board of County Commissioners. We very much appreciated your opinions that was given to the 85 wastewater water project when I appeared before you last month. It is very much the opinion of the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners that this is work that the Water Commission of Douglas County can expect to see going into the future. Hearing a couple of the comments that we just had, by all means, if this is not work that you're interested in doing, please do make it known. And other residents and other interested parties, I'm sure, would be happy to be appointed to the Water Commission. In the meantime, yes, it is the opinion of the Board of County Commissioners. We would like your opinion on this water appeal so that it can be integrated, as we are formally going to do, into our land use processes where water is concerned. And by the way, guys, didn't this come up in several of your interviews? And the answer there, I assure you, is yes. So thank you very much. We very much appreciate this consideration of this review and getting your opinion of this referral. I'm prepared to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Anyone have a question for the commissioner? Not a debate, but a question. Yeah.
So this Water Commission was put together to come up with a plan. We have not started that plan. You're telling us that we can make a recommendation without going through the process of the plan. If that's the case, Will, INTERA, we don't need you guys. We're done. What are we to do? You heard them talk about the groundwater analysis. This whole thing with Pine Canyon has to do with, do they have adequate groundwater? That's the whole 0.75, and that is based on non-renewable water is why it has stayed so high. And you're telling us, ignore a 2050 water plan, give us a response now. What are we supposed to do then as the Water Commission? Are you telling us to ignore putting together a water plan and just throwing stuff out?
Is there an actual question that desired a response there, Chair?
Is there an actual question?
Yeah, was a response desired?
Are we to put together a 2050 water plan?
Yes.
Then how do we respond to things like this when we have not completed the water plan?
You were all very specifically chosen for your knowledge of water.
Okay, we can give you a response in a year.
I'm sorry, Chair, may I complete the response?
Go ahead.
You were all very chosen very specifically for subject matter expertise that you would bring to the commission pertaining to water in Douglas County. You are at the same time a diverse commission. You have representatives from water boards. You have representatives from municipal councils. You have development interests that are on the board, the commission, and then you have what would be considered resident interests. So how your opinion is being solicited and will be welcome. By the way, Chair, it is very much the desired outcome by the Board of County Commissioners, not only for a majority opinion, but also a minority opinion to be expressed.
Tricia?
Yeah, Frank, I was just going to mention that the second bullet under the purpose of the bylaws, under the second bullet, the purpose of our bylaws is the Water Commission is to advise the Board of County Commissioners on water topics identified in Douglas County, addressed in state and federal legislative items and related to regional and statewide issues. So I would say this is a big development. The issue is the appeal, and that's really the question in front of the Water Commission. Should that appeal from 0.75 to 0.2 something be approved? And I think that's what we need to discuss.
Roger?
Thank you for appearing in front of us, Commissioner. It's always a delight to have you here.
Always a pleasure to have you be here in front of you, Commissioner Roger.
Commissioner Roger, I love that. Seems like it should be a T-shirt. I stand corrected about future intentions. I was not aware of that. I do have a question, though. This is a quasi-judicial action. When this applicant did apply, were they aware that there was another bar for them to meet, which was some sort of a decision or opinion from this body? Were they aware of that?
Every applicant to land use applications in Douglas County must be prepared for the referral process. And that is all the capacity that is being asked of the Water Commission right now, is an opinion based on a referral. I can assure you, having read through many of the referrals that come through, I would say the majority are not straight up yes support, no declines, so much as they are opinions on the challenges that the applicant could face, opinions that of that referral agency to the Board of County Commissioners to be considered, and that is really all that's being asked. No more so the referral opinion being placed before the commission right now. So I do not know specifically. I have obviously not spoken to the applicant on this matter. I actually know very little about what is in the county packet, largely because it hasn't been presented to the Board of County Commissioners at this time.
it would be a new bar since it's the first time it's ever happened. But contemplating the future is different, right? Because that's a new application. But I appreciate that. I also appreciate the bylaws and how it's stated. It says issues, not specific projects. And that concerns me. Issues, topics, those are general. Those are things that actually involve the people of Douglas County versus a specific project that we would weigh in on, which that is litigation. That concerns me. If that is, and we do serve at the will of the commissioners, and I am perfectly happy to serve at the will of all three commissioners and give minority and majority opinions. If that is your will for us to weigh in on specific projects and put the people of Douglas County possibly on the hook for a lawsuit, that worries me. But again, we serve at the will of the Douglas County Commissioners. Is that the sense I'm getting? Is that what we're being asked to do here today?
My response to all of that, Commissioner Hudson, is it is the request of the Board of County Commissioners for the opinion of the Douglas County Water Commission as a referral agency on the Pine Canyon Plan Development Water Appeal.
Then I retract my motion. Then I retract my motion to table. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So we have a request for the, actually.
I withdraw.
Now we have a complicated issue. If we're going to follow the rules together, we have a second, but however, a second only puts it on the table for discussion. At this point in time, no, in order to retract the motion, guess what I need?
Second.
We need a motion to retract the motion, so, which he has just given us. So, all those in favor of withdrawing the motion and moving forward with consideration of the request, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay. Nay.
Based upon a voice vote, I think it's clear that the ayes have it and the motion is withdrawn. So now we back up to where we began, which is the request for opinion on the water plan itself. So I will have to, at this point, turn, and I don't, any more questions for Commissioner? Yes, sir?
Yeah, you asked for opinion from the commission. Do you mean a joint opinion from the commission as a whole, or opinions from individual commissioners?
Knowing that this is only the second time the commission has been asked to opine on a water project, the board is very open in terms of there can be a concise majority report as to the majority opinion, and there can be a concise minority report as to the dissenting opinion of the members of the board. A great deal of, I'm going to turn to staff here to ask them to verify that a great deal of latitude was asked of the board in accumulating those opinions into an opinion of the board. Would a super simple, yes, we love it, with a minority report, no, we hate it, be great? Sure it would. But actually, no, we are interested, having put this body together through not some small effort on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners. We would like opinions of the board, of the commission.
I think, and just in reaction to that, that when we commented or gave opinions on the Highway 85 project, we gave individual opinions. We did not issue an opinion from the board.
You have a perplexed look, sir. I would say that we're into new territory at this point because the problem is I don't know what we're judging against. So I think the only thing we can do, and I think Commissioner just said it, the staff will have to begin preparing copious notes and scribing those copious notes and then presenting those as copious notes to the commissioners at this point so that they can determine what they feel is a minority or a majority report. I don't know, in order to determine a majority report, there would have to be a basis of a vote or a consensus of some type. So I think what we did with an administrative process, which is what the corridor was, not a quasi-judicial, it was administrative, was we did provide individual feedback. And my question to the commissioner would be, would individual feedback be suffice as we did in the Santa Fe corridor?
Absolutely. That was a topic of discussion among the commissioners. That would certainly suffice. We are not interested in only one side of the opinions of the commission. There are many of you. If there are many opinions, we are interested in hearing those so that those can be a part of the commissioners' deliberation on this matter when it comes before the board.
Okay, so before we begin, I have an obligation as the chair to just reflect and share, for all the purposes of transparency, what I think some of the concerns are that are happening with different members in the board, to be honest with you. The concerns, and we understand the commissioners would like some feedback because they're going to be faced with a decision. And I understand there's a feeling that this is a typical referral agency. However, it's not a typical referral because we don't have a basis by which what we're judging the outcome of this referral other than opinion at this point. Because we don't have regulations, we don't have a plan done, and we don't have a basis by which we can say, this does not meet our plan because we don't have this here, or this meets the plan, we think it's a good idea, why? And then we can go with that. Other than we're doing is going to have to base it on current water regulation standards and opinion. And I don't know where that takes us in that regard, sir. I'm just saying that's the concern that has been voiced to me by multiple members. They have no problem in providing feedback to the commissioners, I don't think. Where the problem lies is the point of crossing the line and going to a vote or going to a majority-minority report, because that then gives us into a position of, so there was a ruling in reality. And that ruling can be, I think, adjudicated and come out on a hand that says, hey, guess what? I think this looks quasi-judicial to somebody if they take a look at it. Because it had an influence with that kind of a power having been appointed by the Douglas County Commissioners. So I appreciate the commissioner saying we got to start putting in the rules, the policy in place for the board to begin to opine on these kinds of things. I think that's absolutely what we have to do if we're going to go down this road. Okay, because I don't think many of them that I have spoken to me are not, they just didn't have that in their mind. It was the plan, get the plan going. And that was the excitement that drew them to it at this point. And then I think there's a point in which once we have a plan, hey, bring it on, because that's what we have, a basis and a ground, I should say, area that we can say, okay, according to the work we present and we own, here it is. No different than Historical Society. Are there historical implications on that site? Historical Society used to give us reviews. HOAs, are there impacts on HOAs and their citizens and their communities of interest? So I just have to share because I want to make sure that these members are represented for how they're feeling about this particular situation. I can tell you myself, I'm going to have to no comment because I already did. I submitted something in writing. I haven't recused because I'm not going to be making decisions, but all I'm going to do is facilitate this process. So that's where I run into at what point, because I'm juggling, are we or are we not in a quasi-judicial mode at this point? So I think you can understand why there's concern and consternation.
And the board will be very welcome for any comments as to the structure of future considerations of matters of this nature. The board is very open. We actually have a lot of trust in you guys. Okay, every one of you, we have a lot of trust that when you work together, you can improve and enhance Douglas County, and particularly our policies revolving around water. So, Chair, the board is welcome to also take those comments and integrate them into future considerations of this kind as they are more fully integrated into the land use process.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate that. I think as we go through on this particular one, I think if I can entertain the commissioner's nod, I would appreciate it. But that I think opinions and comments, like we did on the last one, I think is where we probably should be, because I will tell you, sitting around this table, I know I can speak for the vast majority. They've sat on boards of some kind or another, and they know the difference between what it is. And the concern is we're engaging into an area that we don't feel we should be involved in because we don't have a basis. So is that okay with you, that we can take and opine on opinion or whatever, and then the staff can play it back if they choose to?
You have the nod, Chair.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Okay. Yes,
I
Harold.
just have a question of legal counsel. Counsel, you know, there's a difference between an opinion and recommendation in my mind. We are not a quasi-judicial function. If the commissioners have asked us for our opinion, they can ask anybody for feedback. Are we engaging in any kind of judicial function here by providing our opinion? Are we crossing any lines?
Thank you. Not to give legal advice over the table here, but I think, and this is what I tried to say at the beginning, I think we can allay some of these concerns by explaining the process as staff has contemplated it for you going forward. This is an opportunity to provide comments as an advisory agency. This is a chance for the board to hear from your expertise about a water issue coming before them. This is not a hearing. This is not something where we're going to have different sides give you their presentations and have you make a determination based on those presentations. That is not what is being asked of you. What is being asked of you is simply to opine, as the chair explained, to give your opinion of a water issue that's coming before the board, in case that opinion may help them make their determination in a quasi-judicial function later. This is similar to what HOAs already do for the county. They meet as a body. They discuss an issue that they've been told is coming before the Board of County Commissioners, and they decide whether they want to comment on it, and then they get the opportunity to present that comment as part of the comments all the comments that come in front of a commissioner before they make a decision in a quasi-judicial capacity. So the intent is to be an advisory referral agency that may offer comments if desired. No comment is an acceptable response. If this body as a whole cannot come up with a comment or doesn't want to comment on something, that is acceptable. There is no requirement for a determination up or down whether this item should be approved or shouldn't be approved. You are not required to make any comment. If there is a desire in a consensus among the commissioners to make a comment to the board, then the staff will attempt to capture those comments and bring those to the board's attention so that they may consider those as part of their process. I think it's important to note here that this is a consensus. This is not meant to be a platform to amplify individual comments. Everyone on this committee may individually comment, as some of you already have. And so the intent is to see if there is some consensus on this body of any kind, whether that be a majority or a minority consensus, to give comments to the board in your capacity as commissioners of this Water Commission. With that, obviously, it is advisable for you to recuse yourself if you stand to personally benefit in any way from the outcome of what's going in front of the board. It is also not a bad idea to recuse yourself if you have already made comments and the board already has your input. That would also be acceptable. And so I just wanted to explain, that's the process as we have understood it, and as the board, we understand, would like it. Now, this may change as we move forward. This is the first attempt to get your input on a water issue. should you want to provide it. And so there may be some tweaking of this as it goes forward, but the board has indicated unanimously that they would like input from this commission in the future on items that touch water in the county. So does that help explain and answer some questions for everyone, I hope?
So it is your turn to request a deposition from the attorney if you like.
I'm happy to answer questions. I expected there might be some.
Anybody? Harold?
Just for clarification, if all we're doing, if we decide we don't necessarily want to come to a consensus, but just share observations for consideration that would be documented, sent to them, is that fair too?
If there's at least two of you who both agree that that should be something that the Water Board or Water Commission brings forward, then we would consider that a minority report from the Water Commission. If at least two of you. If it's just an individual, if it's one person and there's three of you and all three of you have a different opinion, then we would advise that you make those in writing as a formal public comment to the board on your own in your individual capacity.
Thank you.
Roger?
This is the last thing I'm going to say about this. And there is a question in here. There is a clear difference between HOAs, who are stakeholders, who are elected individuals, who would come and give their opinion on behalf of those who are elected. I am elected. I'm elected by the people of my city. I'm the only elected person here at this table. That is different than those of us here who were selected by the commissioners to come here and do a job. There's a significant difference there. I think one that is significant with a difference. So our opinion has a different weight, has a different value. And with that, I accept that because we are here at the goodwill and at the behest of the commissioners. I personally will do as I am asked and tapped on the shoulder to do. All three of the commissioners are friends. I'm here to serve my community. So I'm happy to give an opinion when I have information to be able to do that. In this instance, I don't have enough information. But in the future, if this is part of the service to the county, I'm happy to give that. But I want it recognized, it's not an HOA. We are not elected by the people to come here. There is a difference. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Just to clarify, HOA was an example of an advisory body. There are many different kinds of advisory bodies. That is not the only kind that we elicit input from.
Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, so I think at this point, we're going to proceed with having everyone, and we're going to have to keep this so that the staff can get notes. I know that we have microphones and we can record, but still, in case something's missed, would just like us to go through one at a time and provide your comments as to what you may or may not know at this point. But however, if you wish not to give anything, just merely say no comment, or I have a conflict, or I've already commented in writing, or I'm going to comment in writing. So there's your options at this point. So I think we'll start at this point on the left with Harold. Or would you prefer not to go first?
Okay.
Swing, Harold, swing.
Pardon?
Swing, Harold, swing.
Well, I would offer an observation from experience. For a community, first off, I think, the plan itself that was presented, had a chance to read it, seemed very well thought out, well done, good PUD. There is a housing shortage and a lot of those issues, but I don't want to mush all that together. The question before us is the water appeal. And I've been through a water appeal some years back, many years back. And it was a very, very different process. We had months of hearings on the water appeal. We were required to have renewable water as a water plan. And it was required that we would have at least 70% renewable water at build-out. We had to have a completed and complete water plan, in detail, even down to cost, before going forward. and a commitment to help families in nearby communities whose wells were going dry. Before we received approval, we actually owned renewable water and had a plan to get a renewable system, which we did. There was a major concern about Bell Mountain, about some aquifers going dry, and concerns. And in order to get to, we had back in our days, we had planned a 0.26 was we anticipated we could get to. The requirement on that one, and I think this is the only water appeal that's been through, at least the only one I've ever known, was we had to start at 0.4, and then we could come back after 5 years and 100 homes to get to the lower level. So it wasn't taking the science as in place because they were concerned it would damage residents. We had to prove it first before we could drop the lower. Now that is what we had in the past. We had to have a complete water plan. It had to be renewable based. We had to plan to make it renewable based. And we had to approve the concepts before going to the lower amount. That was the requirement placed on us. I don't know of any other appeals like this for planning community that have gone forward. So that would be at least one that has been approved in the past, and something I always like to look to the past for the future as well, so that the standards, at least there's some precedent for what was going on. So I submit that for something to be considered, not necessarily as a recommendation, because I'm not sure we're supposed to make recommendations, but I can tell you that that is a process that has happened before.
Great, thank you. And we're going to zing over here. Tricia.
Sure. My concern is not necessarily the development. I think the Walker family has a right to develop their property. My concern is the complete use of groundwater for their water source. And I applaud them for the reuse plans that they have in there. And I think that's great. However, I think what is in front of us is the question of the appeal. And I think we do have a basis to consider, which is 18A. And in 18A, it says you need to have 0.75 acre feet of water demand per residence, plus other standards in there. Personally, I don't think that's high enough, and I certainly don't agree with an appeal to go lower than that, which would allow them to create twice as many, 3 times as many housing developments using that standard. So I think that's the big issue. Again, in my opinion, the use of the Dawson and the Denver, which is the source of groundwater supply for almost 10,000, 12,000 well owners in Douglas County. And I couldn't find an augmentation plan. I found some language about the augmentation for the Dawson being less use in the Arapahoe, but I have not found the augmentation plan. I'd like to see it. I just think it's the wrong thing to do. We have systems in Castle Rock where they are working on developing renewable water, and certainly, I don't think it's the right thing to do to use 100% groundwater for a large development right in the middle of Castle Rock. I realize there's complex issues there, but my opinion is that the appeal to point 2 is just not the right thing to do.
Clark.
As you all know, I'm from Castle Rock. So I almost wanted to ask if I should recuse myself, because I actually believe strongly that if this is approved, it eventually will fail, and that means Castle Rock Water will get stuck picking up the pieces, and as a water customer of Castle Rock, it's going to cost me money. So do I need to recuse myself because I have a financial interest in this?
You don't have a direct financial interest. If it passes, there would have to be many hoops between here and any financial impact on you.
Right. As I read through what Pine Canyon provided, first, the county's plan that they had to respond to in their application has 3 sections in the water supply section that specifically talk about working with other providers. First, it says, encourage developments to obtain service from existing water providers. Develop and maintain partnerships with county-wide and regional providers. Work with water providers to explore opportunities to bring renewable water supplies to Douglas County. The response to those starts out with, over the course of multiple years, it has become clear that the only viable pathway for Pine Canyon is the creation of its own water and sanitation district. And what we all know is that water and sanitation district would drill wells and not participate in any renewable or reusable water plans. They go on, though, later, in response to the question of develop and main partnerships, they say, and this is hard to believe, Pine Canyon is willing and eager to join and create county-wide and regional partnerships. We're keen to work in partnership with other entities on a variety of water-related issues after rezoning approval. So if you think about that, what they're saying is we want to go in cheap and dirty to begin with. After you approve us and we realize that this is not a sustainable plan, then we'll work with everybody else and you can figure out how to bail us out. That's what they're saying if you put it in short terms. I'm totally opposed to this.
Let's sit back over here. Evan?
Evan Ela. This morning I made up my mind that I would just say that I have no opinion on this matter because I haven't had a chance to study really the details of this thing. It strikes me that since we do not have our analysis of the aquifers completed and we don't have a good idea of what the aquifer can sustain long term and so forth, I think that I could not support a change in the current rule is 18A. Yeah, 18A recommendation for 0.75 acre feet per unit. So I also, I believe a person can develop their property and do an appropriate density and development that makes sense. And this one, there's some very good parts of it, particularly the closed loop on the reuse system. But I just don't think I have any basis to support reducing the water requirement at this point.
Sean?
I agree with a lot of the comments Evan made, with the exception of I really don't have an opinion from the standpoint of I'm not knowledgeable enough about how the reuse system works or doesn't work. I'm a Castle Rock resident as well. Would I absolutely love to see this project inside Castle Rock? Yeah. I also know some of the backstory of the multiple tries that the Walker family has tried. So, that would be my desire, but I also believe in a person's personal property right. But at this point, I'm just not knowledgeable enough on how the whole reuse system works on this property, and if it is appropriate to go down or up or sideways. So,
Jim?
Does that mean that you're not in favor of an appeal or leaving it at 0.75? I misunderstood. I didn't hear you all.
yeah, I can back up, no comment, because I'm not knowledgeable enough on the whole reuse system to opine one way or another.
Jim Morris. I'm kind of in the same boat as Sean. After the information was posted to the SharePoint site, I've so far invested probably around 2 hours or so, maybe a little more, and I'm not even halfway through all the material that was posted. There's got to be over 1,000 pages of information there, and my due diligence was to educate myself so I could make an educated decision, and I'm not there yet. I just, like I said, I'm 2 hours in, and I'm not halfway through it all yet. So I think I understand the big picture issue, but I'm not educated enough at this point to make a comment.
Don?
Don Langley. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna make a qualified comment, is the term I would use. First of all, I want to make it clear, people do know I'm a director and treasurer at Parker Water. And as such, I don't want to create any impression or inference that Parker Water has taken a position or wants to comment to the BOCC on this project. I mean, we have not. So I just want to make that clear. Secondly, from what I can see, this reference project, the whole project, it's noted to be, over 2 decades in development, and recently received the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve both the water appeal and the rezoning. I feel compelled to recognize that process for what it's done. This comes after hundreds or thousands of pages of documentation. There were 6.5 hours of hearings. I sat through all of that, and extensive public comment. So I absolutely had the opportunity at that time, like all Douglas County citizens, to comment within that process, and I did not comment at that time. I would, however, like to make a comment in response to the assertion that growth utilities, we're talking water utilities, such as Parker Water, we have a developed demand standard. We at Parker Water use 1.1 acre feet per SFE. It was asserted that we set this standard, this level, because we will need water from each SFE in the future to supply other SFEs. And this is not true, because every SFE that comes forward to Parker Water needs to bring the 1.5 acre or 1.1 acre feet with them. So it's not a question of building up supply or building up a reserve by having a very large demand standard requirement, an SFE requirement. It's to protect the aquifers. It's about making sure that we have the water in the future. The 1.1 SFE, actually, you could calculate that to mean a 250-year standard instead of a 100-year standard, because our demands are in the 4 to 4.5 acre feet per year. We have further restrictions of credit that's allowed for an applicant for how much water they'll get credit for from each aquifer. So my point is, it's really important, it's very important that the demand standards be respected, that we understand their purpose, and that we make sure that we're guaranteeing water for a long, long time, not just 100 years and into the future. So I would offer that as comment to the county commissioners as they continue to think about where they want to go with this.
Roger.
Is that a long comment?
I too am going to give no comment, but I am going to do it with a statement that I think this conversation is so important and so valuable, because I think it underscores the importance of the work we're doing here. Because just listening to the comments I just listened to, it shows the need, the desperate need for a water plan in our county. That we must have a ruler, that we have a fairness for our developers, for our citizens, where we know where our water assets are, where we can make judgments for the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years about where our water is, where it's coming from, how it can be managed smartly, even as we're talking about this development. So when developers come in, they know exactly where the water is and how it can be used. I hope that we can use our efforts and our smarts to focus back on that, because I think our opining is much better spent on that effort than on this appeal process that will be handled, I'm sure, very well by the 3 commissioners. But my comments here today on it would matter very little, so I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Okay, with that, as I've already told you, I have no comment because I had put them in writing. But I do want to take this opportunity of expending your time. Oh, we're at 42, I gotta say something. Oh, before I do that, are there anybody online that is a commissioner that would like to make any comments? Anybody online that's a commissioner that would like to make any comments?
Thank Thank you, Chair. I don't see that there is anyone online that might like to make comments. The panelists are able to unmute themselves, so
Okay.
if they do have comments, then please feel free to unmute yourself and make comment.
Okay, great. So I don't want to complicate the world or anything or mean to, but I'm just going to say this from the aspect of when we are looking at water, let's just keep one thing in mind, which is really ironic that we have to look at too. When does a right become a regulatory takings? When does me having water over here mean one thing, and yet they have the obligation, the commissioners, to now weigh a different problem? And I'm talking from experience, sitting on multiple water districts, sitting as a commissioner, town councilman, and several other things. The thing we also have to be careful, and this is the one that is so difficult to measure, but it is an absolute fact. And it bears every one of us, because every one of us that sits in a water district is paying that price right now. And what that price is, when you force people into renewable water, you better come with a viable plan that helps offset the takings when you have no renewable plan. Your renewable plan, is the same as your groundwater plan. And I say that because you go out on the market and try to buy renewable water, when you state, I must have this, good luck. The cost per acre foot for that water versus groundwater is huge and immense, and it creates bidding wars. And then we've got districts bidding against districts, bidding against districts, bidding against cities. And now then, who pays the difference because we all have to outbid the other? The citizens, okay? There is another point that has to start being thought about on how we manage through that. Because if you can't get through the financial aspect, then we're going to end up in regulatory takings. And not a fun game, because when does that stop? That's just my personal opinion. So, with that, I have no comment. And I don't think we have anything else other than I'm going to turn it over to staff. Any closing comments? Ma'am, anything, sir? Nothing? Okay. And pardon?
Motion to adjourn.
It's what I'm looking at. Motion to adjourn, and I apologize for taking 15 minutes of your time because we ran over. Motion to adjourn, second? Second. No vote needed. Thank you very much.